This is Join Us in France, episode 204. Bonjour, I'm Annie, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France, its many quirks, its history, its language, and of course, destinations in France you want to learn about because hopefully you'll be visiting soon. On today's episode, I talk to Mary-Lou Weisman about the best of the Vaucluse department in Provence. Not sure where the Vaucluse is? I know you've heard about many of these towns because they are absolutely lovely. Mary-Lou is the author of a book called Playing House in Provence, and her love for the area certainly comes through loud and clear in today's episode. If you're interested in Provence and planning your own trip to Provence, you should also check out the Join Us in France website, then go to Destinations, and then Provence area. We've done 13 other episodes about Provence. It's definitely a favorite of ours. For show notes and photos for this episode, go to joinusinfrance.com/204, the number 204. Join Us in France is brought to you by Patreon supporters and Addicted to France, the small group tour company for people who want to enjoy France to the fullest with zero stress. Elise and I are getting together next Monday to set some new dates for tours in 2019, so stay tuned for more soon. Join Us in France needs your support. To see all the ways you can support the show, visit joinusinfrance.com/support. Hello, Mary-Lou, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Well, hello, Annie. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So Mary-Lou reached out to me to talk about the Vaucluse, which is an area in Provence that she knows pretty well. She is also the author of a book called Playing House in Provence, How Two Americans Became a Little Bit French. I don't know. I might have to challenge you on that. There are an awful lot of Americans who think they've become a little bit French, and as far as I can tell, they didn't. But anyway, but we're going to talk about the book a little bit at the end of the conversation, but I haven't even read the book, so I won't be able to focus, it won't be the focus of the episode. Our goal here is to help you prepare your visit to the Vaucluse, and we'll talk about some of the must-see places and some that you've never heard about, because you've been in the Vaucluse quite a bit, haven't you, Mary-Lou?
Yes, what my husband and I did in order to become, how about a very little bit French, is that we went, we spent 4 sequential Septembers in the Vaucluse, in the same area, not necessarily in the same rented house, but in the same area. And so that in total is 4 months. And during that time, we took French lessons, and we tried very hard to explore the region, sometimes by car, often by bike. And we really think that we did a pretty good job of exploring the fantasy we had of Provence and turning it into reality. We actually made friends, and we explored and found some places that I don't think most French tourists get to see.
Not French tourists? Or did you mean American tourists?
I meant American tourists or tourists from anywhere.
Yes. Oh, that's good that you were able to make some friends and get to know the area very well. The reason why I say that there's lots of people who think they've become French is, and you mentioned that you took some French classes, and that helps tremendously because I've heard from Americans who don't speak a word of French and who say, "Oh, I'm part French." Like what?
Well, our talents with the language. I continue to study French here in the States. Our talents by way of my French teacher are designated assez bien.
Oh, c'est bien, ça va. So where did you take your classes? Because I'm sure lots of listeners will be interested in hearing about the training program you went through.
Well, we found by pure serendipity a French woman who lived in Île-sur-la-Sorgue. And we saw, in fact, this is how the whole adventure started. We saw her poster tacked to a telephone pole, and we stopped to write it down because at that very moment we had been discussing, should we or shouldn't we embark on this crazy adventure of staying a month? This was a visit before the first 1 month visit. And as we were copying down her email address, out she came from her house. And we had a conversation, and she showed us her teaching quarters, and she was absolutely understandable to us. Both of us had 3 years of high school French, and between gestures and speaking slowly, she was able to communicate with us, and we thought, this is getting more and more interesting. And by the time we got home and unpacked, I wrote her an email and said, we'd like to arrange to spend a month and study with you. So we studied with her 3 times a week. We showed up at 10 o'clock. We had lots of homework, and we studied for a couple of hours, and then we had lunch with her, which we paid for, which was, in fact, à la French mode. It was really dinner. She was a wonderful cook. And during that time, we also spoke only French. And when we got better, she began inviting her friends to have lunch with us. Then they began inviting us for an aperitif or whatever. And people were really curious about us because it was we were the only people around. And I think we were a curiosity at first. And then I think they got interested.
Sure. Do you happen to remember her name?
Of course I do. Her name is Monique de Rosier.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, maybe some of the listeners will reach out to her and see if she can give them the same kind of wonderful French lessons. Okay.
She was an extraordinary teacher.
Excellent. Okay, so going back to some basics about the Vaucluse. The Vaucluse is one of these places that, first of all, it's a department. Vaucluse is the name of an official department, which means kind of like a county in America. And
yeah, it's really it's an area surrounded by mountains, and it's extremely beautiful.
Right. It's not on the coast. It's in Provence, but not on the coast. It's a little bit, just a tiny bit north of Aix-en-Provence. And so in France, we have this problem that we have a lot of names for things, and foreigners get confused about what they mean. So Vaucluse is the department. That's still a name that we use today. And that department is part of the Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region.
Oui.
And we shorten that to PACA, P-A-C-A. Okay, that's that we call it in French. But you also have the historical name of Luberon. Right?
Yes, the Luberon.
And
exactly.
That's a more... there's no actual boundaries to that because that's a historical name. And so the boundaries changed over time. But some of what people call the Luberon today overlaps quite a lot with the Vaucluse.
Exactly. And the area, the Vaucluse in the ancient Provençal means closed valley.
Yes.
And the area that we moved between, that we've spent the most time in, lies between Avignon and Apt.
Uh-huh.
So, and the Nacional, the road is just a straight shot.
Uh-huh.
And Ile-sur-la-Sorgue is closer to Apt than it is to Avignon. It takes us about 45 minutes to drive from Avignon to, for instance, Ile-sur-la-Sorgue, which is the dead center of our interest because because that's where our French teacher lived, and that's where we lived for 2 of the 4 Septembers.
So that's where you were based out of. What are the two places?
Mostly.
What are the places did you base out of?
Well, we've lived twice in 6 kilometers straight uphill from Ile-sur-la-Sorgue in a tiny town of 850 people, 852 when we got there, called Saumon de Vaucluse. And actually the only thing of interest there at the very, very top is the Marquis de Sade's childhood home.
Oh.
So he was only a little boy then. It was probably the worst sadism he practiced was pulling the wings off flies.
Yes, we hope so. So that's Saumon de Vaucluse, Saumane.
Exactly.
D-E, and then Vaucluse, Vaucluse. I want to spell these things because the listeners sometimes, they will remember it better if they've heard it spelled out, if they have a picture of it in their head. But of course, all of these, if you want to see them written out, you go to joinusinfrance.com and the number of the episode, and you'll find all of this written out for just in case we say some words that are not very clear. Okay, so the most important tourist attractions in the Vaucluse are Avignon. It's the biggest. I think it's the department seat, isn't it? Or is it Orange? Actually, I don't know which one it is. But either way, the 2 big cities are Avignon and Orange, right?
Yes.
In Avignon, you can see the Palais des Papes, so the old papal residence, and the Pont d'Avignon, which is an old bridge from the 1100s that's half gone, but half of it survived, which is really remarkable because most of the bridges that old are totally gone. At Orange, the Orange is great for people who love Roman history, especially their Arc de Triomphe, because that's very early Roman history. Yes. It's like 23 or something before the Common Era, so it's very old.
May I give your listeners and lookers a tip about the Palais des Papes? It's really very, very impressive on the outside, but I would suggest that they not pay the entry fee for the inside. It is really a bit of a snore.
That's good to know. I have been, but it's been so long that I don't remember what we saw in there.
Very little.
So it's empty. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'd say don't do that. And the other thing that we did that was so much fun, and this is why we like to think of ourselves as a little bit French, is that we hung out outside the Papal Palace, and we watched the elderly retired gentlemen play boule. And when they finally noticed us, they invited us to join in. These are the kind of experiences that we live for when we travel.
Yeah. Well, that's always fun, especially if you can manage to play it a little bit.
Yeah, it's just another way of fulfilling our goal, which is to break through the tourist veil.
Yeah. Did you go see the Pont d'Avignon? I assume you did.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, just to get to Avignon, one drives right by alongside the beautiful, beautiful Rhone River, and there is that wonderful bridge. It gets them almost 3/4 of the way, maybe 2/3 of the way across the Rhone.
Yeah,
and we have to sing every time we go by.
Yes, do you want to sing it for us now? I'll accompany if you wish.
Will you do that? All right, 1, 2, 3, go. Here we go.
Yes, here we go.
Sur le pont d'Avignon, on y danse, on y pense. Sur le pont d'Avignon,
On y danse.
on y danse tout en rond.
Yes, that's it. That's just a
Okay.
kid's song. And it goes on much longer than that, but we're not going to subject
No,
you
we're
to
not.
the whole song. Okay. So do you have any like restaurant recommendations for Avignon or?
I do. I do. I really, really do. And I don't know if it's the best restaurant in Avignon.
Well, yeah, that's subjective anyway.
But that's subjective. I love French food, and it is called Le Bistrot Lyonnaise.
Okay, le bistrot lyonnais, okay.
I do not have an address. I'm sorry. I must have it somewhere, but I don't have it handy at the moment.
Well, if it's still open, I will find it and put the address on the website for listeners.
Great. And I want to mention that the chef, who is named Monsieur Meduan, Meduan, is a charmer. His English is perfect, and of course, so is his French. Mm-hmm. It's a very small restaurant, very intimate. And when we were there, of course, again, they noticed that even though we were speaking French, can't imagine how they noticed we weren't French, but in any event, he started introducing everybody to us. And I think he does this normally. He comes out of the kitchen and he talks to his guests and he tells jokes. And I don't mean he's like some kind of second-class comedian. He's just a charmer.
Yeah.
And by the time we got done, and of course our French was very well oiled by that time with a nice red, all of the people in the restaurant were chatting with us. So I suggest that is a absolutely super place to both enjoy a wonderful meal and have an experience that's, again, quite intimate.
Yeah, that's wonderful that it's a proprietor that will chat with people. You know, I do that everywhere I go. I always talk to the waiters, talk to my neighbors, talk to whoever, and it makes for a much more enjoyable dining experience, I think.
Absolutely. By the time we had left, we were invited by the people who were dining next to us to a pig roast the next day. And we almost did it, but we didn't.
You missed something. Those are good. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry now.
Yeah, those are very good. Any more recommendations for Avignon?
I don't have any others for Avignon that are outstanding. It's just a lovely city to walk through.
Yeah, I would say spend a couple of hours. It's probably not a place where you want to spend a week, you know.
No, I wouldn't. I think
maybe half a day.
Oh, lots of places that I love. I mean, one of the places that we discovered is an amazing tiny little town called Vaucluse. Do you know Vaucluse?
I do not.
It is amazing. You can get there by way of Lourmarin, which is also one of the prettiest towns.
All right, you better spell all these names.
Yes, okay. Vaucluse rhymes with Dukes, but it's spelled Buaux.
Yep.
It's crazy. It's a crazy spelling, but there it is. And you can find it. You have to go to get there. You have to go downward on a serpentine, narrow road where it's a road that was, I mean, it is a very downward, very steep descent. You will see people rappelling from the cliffs.
Wow.
The river made that gorge, and it's very narrow. The street is very narrow to get there, and as you're driving, you feel as if that your car can almost not fit through the walls made by the cliffs, and you'll see something that is rare, which is horseback riders, and at the very, very bottom of this extraordinary sort of hair-raising, exciting. If you have kids, they'll love it. It's better than any. It's better than going to a fairground. It's better than, riding a carousel. It's much scarier and much more fun. And at the very bottom, there is a Provençal restaurant. So it's. If you're in good command of your car, you will be fine. And if you have children, they will be squealing with delight.
Very good. Yeah, I'm looking at photos as you talk. It looks like a very typical Provençal kind of village. The photos don't do the hill justice, but I believe you that it's very steep. There's certainly a lot of that in Provence. So.
It is it's certainly the steepest place we ever were. There are lots of high places, but I think this may be the steepest. The most exciting thing is the trip, really. The restaurant at the bottom is very nice, and in fact, there are two. Bucques should not be visited to visit a typical Provençal town. It's not the town; it's the trip.
Okay.
And there's another restaurant that's almost all the way down that's called La Loube, L-A, and then L-A-U-B-E, I think. That means a female fox.
Okay.
That's a pretty well-known restaurant. And it's also a very good restaurant, but there you'll see tourists. At the bottom of the hill, you might see some tourists too, but not so many.
Oh, very good. That's good to know. But you don't remember the name of the one at the bottom of the hill?
It's Bucques.
Oh, okay.
And it's
same name as the village.
Yeah, it's sort of a town.
Okay.
But it's the destination would be the restaurant La Loube, and then all the way at the very bottom there is another restaurant that is also Provençal food and also good.
Okay, very good. So La Louve is that? So you said a female fox. Maybe a female wolf. Louve, L-O-U-V-E.
No, L-O-U-B-E. I think it's female for no, without an L. L-O-U-B-L. B-E. I'm sorry. Yeah. L-O-U-B-E. It may be a Provençal word for female fox. But if you look at a map, if you look at the Luberon area, if you look on a map and find what can I say? The Lourmarin, for instance, which is a very well-visited, very beautiful town. You will see how to get to Bucques.
It looks like this restaurant is permanently closed. Auberge de la Loube. Auberge de la Loube, it appears, is permanently closed.
Well, cancel that order.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry too.
No, it's too bad. But it happens. It happens. If the proprietors can't work anymore and nobody else wants to take over, sometimes they close.
Well, it's hard to live in a hole.
Okay, but Bucques. That, I don't know how they say it over there. I would say Bucques. Bucques. I'm not sure how they would say it.
Rhymes. Bucques, B-U-O-U-X. It's really, when I first saw the word, I thought this is an impossible word, but now I think it rhymes with dukes.
Yeah. So the other place that's really very scenic and that everybody goes to visit when they go to the Vaucluse is Gordes. It's Gordes. It's a scenic village, and it's more than a pretty face because it has a lot of history with the Resistance, the French Resistance, and l'Abbaye de Sénanque. There's a chateau. There's the Saint-Firmin Palace with the famous cellar. Anyway, that's a place that people will probably want to check out. Do you have any recommendations for us there?
Of course. Of course, I have some advice about the wall, particularly about l'Abbaye de Sénanque, which is one of my favorite places and is an 11th century, I guess that's Norman. The abbots still live there. What I love about that place, there are two things to mention about that place. One, if you go there, which you're likely to do because it's so beautiful. In fact, it is the abbey that appears on a lot of American calendars with rows and rows of lavender blooming in front of it.
It's super famous.
Yeah, it's exactly. So I don't need to tell you about that. But I think I'd like to tell you that if you walk inside, you will see the huge stones, limestone stones that were cut and made used to build this abbey. But what's so special is, first of all, they are huge. The saws are the size of a half of a regular room. And you can easily imagine two men sawing away at it, at a stone. There are all the implements that were used in the 11th century are hanging on the walls, which makes the whole building fascinating.
Yeah.
And then if you look carefully, you will see that each mason who cut a stone initialed it. So that's how he was paid. Yeah. So you will see he either initialed it or he put his sign on it. And in one instance, as I remember, the sign is a seal, a snail, a curl.
Very interesting.
When you get done with that, and there are tours in English and tours in French, and I admit the French tour kind of did us in, but the other thing you can do that practically nobody does is if you go near the end of the day, you can go around the back of the Abbey and go inside and sit down quietly and watch Vespers. It is such an amazing experience to see the residents bowing and to hear the Gregorian chants.
Yeah.
It's very special.
So that's around 6 p.m.
Yes, I think it is. And you have a complete tour of the place, which is plenty interesting. And you learn that one of the rooms was heated because it was I think you call it the scriptorium. It was the room in which they had to write down things.
Yes.
And so that was the only room that was heated, so their fingers didn't get too cold so that they could write. So it's a memorable place.
Yes.
And it's one of the great beauties.
Yes, it's gorgeous. And also they sell some food products. I can't remember if it was, they probably sell honey, lavender honey. But
yes.
I seem to remember buying some food items there that were very enjoyable. I think they're mostly jams. I'm not sure.
Okay. Don't count on that.
Yeah. Anyway, highly recommended. But just like all of these super popular places, people go with busloads of tourists. And so what you need to do is time it correctly. Most tour buses leave by 4 p.m. That's true in a lot of these touristy places, and I haven't verified it for l'Abbaye de Sénanque, but I would bet that by 4 p.m. most of the tour buses are gone. So go late in the day and attend the Vespers, which I think you would really enjoy.
Yes, and if you sit, if you sit in the back, You can sneak out when they get to what we were afraid might be a sermon, which we knew we were not going to understand. So sit in the very back so that you can politely leave. But it's worth spending 10 or 15 minutes just watching and listening to those chants.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Okay, the other place you recommend is l'Île-sur-Sorgue and their market.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, we live 6 kilometers from the center of Île-sur-la-Sorgue in Saumon de Vaucluse, which has, as I said, nothing of particular interest except the baby Marquis de Sade's first castle.
Yeah.
The Île-sur-la-Sorgue is a gorgeous town, city, about 28,000 people. Mm-hmm. It's flat as opposed to most of the tourist places people visit. Lourmarin is also flat and highly recommended. And Saturday, we think there's a jazz band that plays there. So that's a treat.
So spell that. Lourmarin?
All right. Lourmarin is beautiful. We bike there from Île-sur-la-Sorgue. It's
but how do you spell it?
It has Lourmarin.
Okay, Lourmarin. Okay.
And that would be the place that you would you could leave. You could go there earlier in the day, and then you could leave later in the day for the Abbaye de Sénanque.
Okay.
So that's a good itinerary for one day. When you walk into Île-sur-la-Sorgue, the first thing you will see, well, I'm not specifically talking about the market, but I will in a second, is that the town is called the Little Venice. It's full, the river Sorgue runs right through it. When the Pope was in Avignon, the fishermen from Île-sur-la-Sorgue actually they poled in these remarkable narrow boats to the Palais de Pape to deliver fresh fish to the Pope. It's very famous for that. Of course, it doesn't happen anymore. But you will see all these lovely canals, and there are lots of cafes, of course, along the canal. It's a great town to walk in. When it comes to the market, it's extraordinary. First of all, it is the antiques market of the entire region. It's always held on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. It starts at 8:30, and if you're really, really smart, you will get there at 8 o'clock and you will find a place to park, even within the town. If not, certainly on the road leading into the town.
Right.
So you won't have a long walk.
French parking style.
Oh, man. It is so busy and so busy in a very exciting way. Everything is spread out along all these main streets. You can buy any kind of food you want. You can buy clothing, lipstick, just
makeup, olives, spices, clothing, shoes, knives, baskets, anything you want.
Olives of all colors, prepared foods that are very nice. The center of Île-sur-la-Sorgue is where the church is, and that's probably the most. There probably is the most stuff there. By stuff, I mean food, flowers. Yeah. And then as you branch out, there's all kinds of stuff. And then across the Sorgue, if you go over the little bridge. Oh, and I didn't mention the water wheels, which are as tall as at least 2 people. And they're made of wood, and they churn at the river in 4 different places. You cannot miss them. You don't have to look for them. They churn at the river, and their purpose was later on in Ile-sur-la-Sorgue, they made fabric. So they were a source of power. Now they're just gorgeous. They're wonderful to see. And as I say, you cannot miss them. If you cross the river, then you're in antiques land, where you can buy all kinds of stuff like, bureaus and mantles and, old mantelpieces. And I actually once almost bought a butcher block. And it's totally crazy. I couldn't even afford to send it to my house by container. But it's the kind of place where you have to be careful because you might just buy anything.
Yeah, you might be very tempted by a lot of things.
Yes.
And obviously, since you've rented a house there, you recommend people stay longer and rent a house. I assume that's what you would recommend people do if they can.
Exactly. I mean, that's if they are interested in becoming a little bit French, that's the thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you get everything. I mean, you are no longer a tourist.
Right, because you start shopping, you go back to the same stores all the time. If you're the kind of a gregarious person who will talk to people, they will remember you and they will greet you like they've known you their whole life. Because the people in the south of France are like that.
Absolutely. And even if your French is really feeble, they congratulate you, they correct you, they love their language, and they love to hear you mangle it if you must.
Yes.
Because,
well, we all have to start mangling. I mean, that's how it works.
Yes. Yeah, I went to a patisserie. I'd been there several times, and my favorite thing is a sacristain, which is a terrific kind of pastry in the morning that I loved with my coffee. And I was studying French feverishly, and
I'm gonna have to Google sacristain. I don't know what it is.
It's a.
Well, I know what it is. Never mind.
It's like a set. It's a croissant like pastry that has a lot of sugar on the tops. Confectioner's sugar is what we call it here. So it's a good idea not to inhale because it would go straight to your lungs. But it's delicious. And anyway, I got there. It wasn't ready. And instead of saying, okay, I'll come back, I said something like, okay, I'll turn around. And the woman kind of smiled. And I knew I'd made a mistake. But she knew me and she understood me. And so, of course, I returned a few minutes later and got my sacristain. But we would always go to the same patisserie. We would go to, there's a marvelous shop where they have wonderful meats and sausages. And we fell in love with a sausage that came, that's rare. You can't get it in the United States. And so we always bought that, and they knew us, and they were always ready for us, and we always exchanged a few words. And of course, whenever you go into a shop, in France, you say bonjour, madame, or bonjour, monsieur.
Yes,
and that starts things off beautifully.
Yes,
they are used to being greeted. It's quite the opposite in the United States. In the States, the shopkeeper comes to you and says hello. May I help you? In France, you attract the attention of the shopkeeper by saying bonjour.
Yes.
So stuff like that, little stuff, stuff goes a long way.
And this is very good advice. A lot of visitors get obsessed with these lists of best things, best pastry shop, best butcher shop, best this and that. I would say if you can establish a friendly relationship with any pastry shop, with any butcher shop, it will be 1,000 times better than just walking in, getting your stuff, getting out, and running along to find the best one that you saw listed in some website somewhere, because it's the relationship that matters. It's not being the best. I mean, all things being equal, most French bakeries make the same products. They make them with the same recipes. It's not going to be that different from one bakery to another. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I certainly did. I couldn't agree with you more. The most critical thing is the relationship. And if you're staying, I mean, Ile-sur-la-Sorgue is a good base, or so are some of the other small, what they're called les plus belles villages.
Yeah, les plus beaux villages de France.
Yeah, and they are identified. And so it's very easy for you to just find out which ones they are. That's good advice, I think. They're most all of them, except for Le Marin, are on the top of hills, because that whole area was
it's very hilly.
That whole area was the hills were where they built their defenses, and then the Saracens were down below killing everybody. So they were defending, Bonnieu, Goult, Gourd, Roussillon, all those towns are very near each other, and they were all at the top, and they were all fortresses in effect.
Right. And they're all gorgeous, by the way.
They're gorgeous, and there are still caves there. There's a very well-known restaurant in Bonnieu called Le Fournil, Fournil.
Yep.
It's actually located in a cave. You can't miss it. It's the center of town. It's very popular. I would not say that was one of my great tips, because you can hardly miss it, but it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing that I think is a treasure, if I may,
Sure.
that I would like to recommend. We came upon it by accident at the end of our fourth stay. We were driving out of Bonnieu, which was the last place we lived, and we passed a sign that couldn't have been more than a few minutes outside of Bonnieu on the route that you would be leaving Bonnieu.
Okay.
And it doesn't the street doesn't have a name, which is really too bad. However, just look to your right and you will see, and I'm just going to throw one more French thing, a place, when we were there, it was like a hand-painted sign stuck into the ground near a dirt road.
Yep.
And the sign read, Les Enclos, ECLOS, des, DES, Bories, BORIES.
Yes.
That is a village of Bories, which are, for the most part, igloo-shaped enclosures made entirely of stone, no cement, just like an igloo. Nothing holds them together except gravity. They've existed since before Neolithic times.
Right.
They are scattered all over the landscape of Luberon or Vaucluse. You will see long ones in which people clearly either lived themselves or kept their animals. You'll see small ones in which shepherds slept while they were guarding their flock.
Yes.
And here's the tip. Take that road, give them the €5. It's well worth it. You will walk into an unrenovated village that will knock your socks off.
Yeah.
Some of them are in perfect condition. Some of them are wrecks, and I love a wreck. And here's the difference between L'Enclos des Bories, which is just outside of Bonnieu, and the totally renovated Bories village, which is across the street from Gourd, Gordes, which you mentioned earlier, which is, again, what we call a village perché, a perched village.
Yes.
It is beautiful. It is very, very attractive to tourists. And right across the street is a totally renovated Bories village, which is not what I'm recommending.
Right. You want to go see the l'Enclos des Bories. Actually, if you go, I went on Google Maps earlier and I Googled l'Enclos des Bories, Beaulieu, France. Right. And you can totally find it. It's not that well hidden anymore now that we have Google Maps.
Okay.
But it looks gorgeous. It looks gorgeous.
It's amazing, and the guide, of course, who knows if she's still there?
Right.
But the guidance, there was no one there when we were there. I'm afraid now you're going to see a lot more people. Yeah. But even so,
still worth it.
I read some. Oh, way is it worth it? Way worth it. And you can see where you can actually see their way of life. Mm-hmm. That you can see where the beehives were. Everything is built into their stonework, and so the beehives they're not there, of course, but you can see where they were. You can see their irrigation system. You can walk inside their newest house, mm-hmm. Which is, a few thousand years old. And it's got 2 stories as opposed to some of the little boris which have no stories at all. Mm-hmm. The other thing she showed us is she took us to the 4 corners of the village, and you could see, don't know what you called them, but they were the places that were constantly guarded. I guess guard posts.
Yeah, guard posts or watch places or watchtowers or watch places. I don't know.
Exactly. You got it. And they are at 4 corners of this Bori village. Yeah. And they were constantly manned to make sure that no one was trying to attack.
Right.
Because they are the high ground and people want to be on the high ground.
Right.
And so these were defensive posts. And even now, the woman told me that some backpackers or hippies in the hippie days would actually walk into the village, climb into the village, climb up, and occupy these houses, sleep over, and then continue on their way.
Wow.
So this is the clearest sight I ever had of all the 4 months of how it really was to be alive at that time.
Right.
And for me, that was really super valuable.
Yeah, that's good to see. There are places in the Dordogne in France where you can see similar things that are about 20,000 years old, also very old. But it's always very sobering and very interesting to see that people long ago were not that different from us. I mean, we have a lot more modern everything, but they were seeking shelter in similar ways than we do. They wanted water and safety and a warm place to sleep,
And there was even considerable agriculture. Mm-hmm. They also had, you could see where they penned their animals, mostly goats. Goats are very big in that region. It's
lovely.
It's a treat. It's a great treat.
So the last thing I want you to talk about is the Pont Julien and the bike path between Beaulieu and Apt that you probably did. And then we'll move on to talking about your book a little bit.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you. Okay, so when we were living in Beaulieu, which is right on the main road, most of these places that you will want to see are off of the main road. So that's the friendly thing about the Vaucluse. So we would get on our bikes and we'd have this absolutely hair-raising trip downhill. Yeah. I mean, really downhill. And, holding onto our brakes for safety. And then we get to the bottom, then we get off our bikes and we cross the highway called the National.
Yeah.
And we would then find ourselves at a bike path that is running parallel, at least for a while, to the National. So it's not a big deal to find the bike path.
Yeah.
Then we would mount our bikes and we would pedal in the direction of Apt. Now, this is our big deal biking experience. Your people who visit your blog should know that there are other bike paths in the region that I don't know about.
Right. There's lots of bike paths everywhere.
Yeah. All they have to do, because you could rent a bike in Bonnieux, very nice bike, which we did. And the rental bike is just about a 16th of a mile from the restaurant I mentioned. It's also very easy to find.
Yeah.
You can rent a bike and zip down the hill and cross the Nacional and then get on the bike path and just go. Now, one of the things that is a skill you develop or not, depending on your nerve, is going through these turnstiles that are periodically located. I don't know why they're there, probably to slow you down. There aren't too many of them, but at the beginning, I used to get off my bike and just go through them and then remount my bike. And then as I got more experience, it got to be a big challenge, and pretty soon I was good at it. Anyway, as you bike, you're not seeing the Nacional, which would be on your left as you're going in the direction of Apt. You would see a lot of wonderful old farmhouses. You'd see a lot of grapes growing. I mean, and the harvest is in September. So, it's just delicious even to just see them in full red bloom, purple bloom, really. And you'll pass houses, you'll pass enclosures for animals. You'll arrive at the real payoff, which is Le Pont Julien, Julius Caesar's bridge. It's 2,000 years old, and it's a complete bridge, and it takes traffic, and it is extremely amusing because the first time we were there, it's only a one-lane bridge, so people would politely wait while someone crossed the bridge from the other side, and then it would be their turn to cross the bridge. Yeah. So for the first couple of years we were there, we would take our turn and we would cross the bridge and cross back just for fun. And then I think it was the third year that we were there, oh my gosh, they went and built an actual bridge right next to which is kind of disappointing, but that left the Le Pont Julien free for the bikers.
Right, for bikers and foot traffic.
Yes.
Right. That sounds like a good idea to me. I mean, because it's 2,000 years old, you want to preserve it.
Exactly. Well, the French, bless them, are so good at honoring their heritage, which is why it's such a wonderful area to visit and why it's so popular, because they hold on to things. And if they find a cave, then it's a perfect place for an antique store. They never think of building in there.
Right.
And they display the jewelry on ledges. They're wonderful about that. Yeah. And they build in a fashion that keeps the feeling of each town.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we have so many of these old buildings and these old places that we can't keep up with all of them. But we do try. It's something that most French people want to do. Anyway, okay, yes. You've given us some great tips, some great suggestions on things to do. Now I would love to hear about your book and why you wrote it and what it's about.
Well, the book is called Playing House in Provence. You can't buy it in a bookstore. You have to buy it online from either Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And I know that it's found its way to France. I know that because some people have written to me from there. Everything I mentioned today and 50 more things. It's a book of adventures. Everything I mentioned is in there. It's about how my husband and I tried to make ourselves at home. And I all the 4 months that I was there, I kept a journal, not a diary. I didn't tell you what the weather was or boring things like that, unless there was a Mistral, which blew us off our bikes, which did happen.
That's interesting, yes.
But every single chapter is a little morsel. It's a complete experience. It's either an adventure or a meeting up with somebody, or it is not a guide in the normal sense of the word. I don't give stars to everything. I just get enthusiastic when I'm writing.
Right.
So if you read the book from beginning to end, what it really, and you will, what it really is a book that starts with our mulling over this trip in the very scene that I described when our teacher found us near her ad. It starts there and it ends after our fourth adventure. It's full of interesting people, and you get to know them and like them. And they are, and for us, what it was we had this fantasy of trying to be a little bit French. And so there's also a sort of undercurrent in the book that the reader, I think, will enjoy, because you have to be really ignorant not to understand that a fantasy turns into reality. So, but we didn't bother to pay attention to that. So in the first month, it's like, oh my goodness, it's great. We feel like children again. Everything we see is a great discovery. And then as we get older and keep on returning, you can see, the discerning reader can see that Mary-Lou and Larry are kind of getting used to this place. Mm-hmm. And the emphasis is now more on friends than on touring. Mm-hmm. And yet there's always something that we discover. So this is not a book to read if you want to see what you could read in a guidebook.
Right.
This is my voice. And
your experiences. It sounds lovely.
And my experiences. And of course, because we're such amateurs, one day we're just brilliant. We ask for something, we actually get it. We're in good voice. We have a great conversation. The next day, I decide I'm going to a yoga class at the church. Nobody talks to me. I can't understand the instructor. So there's always this drone of humiliation that follows us everywhere we go. So it may not be funny to us at the moment it happens, but it's funny for a reader to see how we screw up.
Wonderful.
So it's not a long book. It's only in paperback. As I said, you can't buy it in a store. You can only buy it online. The Kindle version of the book is, I think, $3.99.
Yeah.
And the response I get from people is, we went to these places, they were fabulous, and we laughed out loud.
Oh, that's great.
And so we're your guides to unusual places and unusual experiences. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mary-Lou. It has been a delight to talk to you. I'm sure the listeners will be eager to try your book. I'm kind of interested, even though I'm already fully French. So I probably do this normally anyway, because I am the kind of person who likes to talk to everybody, and it just irks me if I have a person in front of me who's not responsive. I'll try a joke. I'll try to make like self-derision or something, and it usually works. I mean, with French people, it usually works.
For the French and for English speakers, expats, whatever, they will all enjoy this. Yeah. And all you need is a little bit more nerve than usual.
Yeah, and don't take yourself too seriously. That helps too.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary-Lou.
Thank you, Annie. It's been a lot of fun talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Lisa. Wow, that name is hard to say. I'm not sure. Lisa Weisman. and Janice Medina for pledging to support the show on Patreon this week. And my thanks to all the other patrons who support the show month after month. Thank you so much for giving back. To support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/join us. Patreon. And thank you, Katrina Patrickson, for your one-time donation. It is much appreciated. For my personal update today, let's just say that I've been busy, crossing every T and dotting every I about the upcoming tour in the Dordogne. It's our first time offering this itinerary, so we've got to make sure we have all our ducks in a row. And good news, it appears that we do. We'll have a lot of fun. I've also made more progress on the new Join Us in France website. I only have 30 episodes that need serious help now. It was over 70 last time we talked, so, I've been working hard every evening. I've noticed a nice uptick in shares of the episode posts. And so if you enjoy an episode, I'd love it if you would share it, especially with people you know are going to be visiting that part of France. And once I'm done sorting out the website, I'll start concentrating on the mailing list. I'm finding that one thing at a time works really best for me. I get less distracted that way. And I also wrote a couple of Patreon bonus episodes that I just need to record and push out. They'll come out very soon. September weather has been amazing and just about perfect. There's been little rain, at least in Toulouse where I live. Warm temperatures during the day with nice cool down at night. I just love it. So let's hope that it stays just like that until our Dordogne tour is over, late September. To connect with me, email Annie at joinusinfrance.com or leave a message at 1-801-806-1015. You can also ask to join the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook. And when you do, please answer the 3 questions so I know you're not a spammer. Have a great week of trip planning, and I will talk to you next week. Au revoir. The Join Us in France travel podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2018 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.